In today's event, we will be talking about the Philippines Evidence Program. This is a tripartite partnership between 3IE, Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, and the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, the Philippines' premier socioeconomic planning body. The evidence program aims to strengthen the evidence base on the effectiveness of major governmental reforms and service delivery programs in the Philippines by supporting high-quality impact evaluations. The program also seeks to support the capacity for evidence-informed decision-making in the country, thereby ensuring that the government in the driver's seat has an informative dashboard at its disposal, which is a key theme for today's event. Program, which is funded by DFAT, and we are very happy to have a recorded message from His Excellency Stephen Robinson, the Australian Ambassador to the Philippines, who was kind enough to send us the keynote address in a video message despite his very busy schedule. I'm also happy to mention that 2021 is the 25th anniversary of the Philippines-Australia relations, and today's event is a reaffirmation of DFAT's commitment to advancing evidence-informed decision-making in the region for better developmental outcomes. So over to my colleague, Pradeep, to play His Excellency Stephen Robinson's recorded message.
Magandang hapon and good afternoon to everyone from across the Philippines and the world who have tuned in to today's webinar on demand-driven evidence, putting the Philippine government in the driver's seat. It is my pleasure to provide this opening message on behalf of the Australian Embassy in Manila and to welcome you all to this exciting virtual event. I would first like to acknowledge and thank a number of key participants who have made today's webinar possible. First, I acknowledge the esteemed Philippine government representatives. Assistant Secretary Santos of NEDA, Assistant Secretary Tutay of DOLE, Assistant Secretary Peñaflor of DSWD, and all officials dialing in from across the government. I also acknowledge the expert research teams and panel discussants, including Dr. Orbeta of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, Nazrina Sampayco Badrini of Innovations for Poverty Action, and Yun Chu of the World Bank. And finally, I wish to acknowledge Mari Gaarder, the Executive Director of the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, 3IE, and colleagues from across 3IE's international network. Thank you to all those who have joined what I am sure will be an illuminating set of presentations and an engaging panel discussion on evidence-based policy making. Since 2014, the Australian government has supported 3IE and the Philippine National Economic Development Authority, NEDA, to build demand for and use of evidence in Philippine policy making and development planning. We first entered into this partnership because we recognise that research and sound evidence play a critical role in shaping effective policies and programs. In order for governments to meet the needs of their constituents, the decisions of policymakers must be grounded in evidence, and programs must be monitored, evaluated, and continually improved throughout their implementation. Through our partnership with 3IE and NEDA, expert research teams have undertaken a number of rigorous, mixed methods impact evaluations of Philippine government policies and programs and have put forward practical recommendations for government to consider when designing and redesigning their policies and programs. 3 of these impact evaluations will be presented and discussed today, namely the Department of Labour and Employment's Special Program for the Employment of Students, the Department of Social Welfare and Development's Sustainable Livelihood program, and judicial reforms by the Supreme Court, which aim to improve the transparency, efficiency, and accessibility of the Philippine justice system. Today's webinar is an opportunity to hear from research teams themselves about how these studies were conducted, what lessons were learned, and what concrete policy recommendations were put to government. We will also hear from a panel of experts on how governments can effectively develop and implement evidence-based policies and programs. And I hope that this will inspire positive policy changes, a new wave of impact evaluations, and build even more demand for evidence across government. The willingness of DOLE, DSWD and the Supreme Court to allow these evaluations underscores the commitment by the Philippine government to uncover sound evidence, listen to expert advice, and shape policies to more effectively meet the needs of Filipinos. It is not necessarily easy to put one's hand up for evaluation and scrutiny, so I commend NEDA for its many years of leadership and commitment to this program, and I commend DSWD, DOLE, and the Supreme Court for their open and constructive participation. This partnership is just one example of Australia and the Philippines working together to achieve shared development objectives to build a more stable, prosperous and resilient Philippines. As we celebrate 75 years of diplomatic relations between Australia and the Philippines this year, it is fitting that we reflect on our joint achievements and renew fruitful partnerships. I am proud that the Australian Government, NEDA and 3IE have commenced a new phase of the evidence program this year under Australia's Research for Inclusive Development initiative. We hope that this new phase of the program will see evidence continuing to be sought, understood and incorporated into Philippine policy making over the long term. Of course, much has changed since we first began to implement the evidence program in 2014. Most notably, of course, we are now operating within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. The complexity of the pandemic's impacts and the imperative to move beyond COVID response and towards COVID recovery has only increased the need for well-informed decision-making by leaders and policymakers. Our evidence program is well suited to meet this moment. The second phase will be responsive to the needs of government and flexible in its approach to evidence generation and dissemination. It will help the government to design and augment policies and programs which meet the rapidly evolving needs of Filipinos. The multi-dimensional challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic mean that the stakes are higher now than ever. And so I'm particularly thankful to the Philippine government, IE and research teams for your ongoing commitment to this evidence program. With partners like you in the driver's seat, I have no doubt that the program will continue to be both successful and impactful. I also have no doubt that today's discussion will be engaging, informative, and will drive demand for evidence-based policy making into the future. With that, I'll hand back over to 3IE Executive Director Mario Gaarder to take you through the rest of today's program. Maraming salamat.
Just checking, I lost connectivity for a few seconds. Durgadas, the video was finished playing, correct?
Yes, now you can take over.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Ambassador Robinson, for the address and reiterating DFAT's commitment to support the evidence program to promote the uptake and communication of evidence-informed policymaking in the Philippines. And thank you also to our colleagues at DFAT for organizing all this in the video. We now move to the second part of the program. In this session, using evidence to improve livelihood support programs, our research partner representatives from the Innovations for Poverty Action and the Philippines Institute for Development Studies will be presenting key findings from 2 impact evaluations supported as part of this evidence program. So I'm very happy to introduce the presenters, Aniceto Orbeta, Senior Research Fellow, Philippines Institute of Development Studies, and Emily Beam, Assistant Professor, University of Vermont. We will now be playing the short video presentations by PIDS and IPA, which will be followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A or questions and answers session. Also, please note that the speaker bios are available on the link which my colleagues have provided in the chat box. Finally, before kicking off the presentations and the panel discussions, here are a couple of housekeeping rules. When sending questions to the panel, please use the Q&A box for questions, not the chat function. And if possible, please name the panelist you would like a response from and include your name if you want it said out loud. If the event is disrupted for any reason, we will shut it down and reach out to you over email. The event is also being live streamed on YouTube and shared on social media. If you're joining our event via live stream, please leave your questions in the comments box. In addition, we encourage you to tweet any questions, comments, or points of view on Twitter. In that case, please tag at 3IE News while you tweet. Now over to Pradeep to play the presentation videos.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emily Beam, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Vermont. I'm sorry I can't be here live today, but I'm delighted to have the opportunity to present the results of our impact evaluation on SPES, the Special Program for Employment of Students. This is work with Sala Kimbo at the University of the Philippines, supported and carried out by IPA, with support from 3IE, DFAT, which was then AUSAID, and also close partnership with DOLE. So the program that we're seeking to evaluate here is connecting students from disadvantaged backgrounds, poor but deserving youth, with employment opportunities during school breaks to help support their education by earning money that they can use to cover tuition fees, school expenses, and any other costs associated with schooling. The hope is also that this might help them build real-world skills that can translate to positive employment outcomes in the future. Most of the work here is students being paired with municipal governments to conduct office work, though there is a small and growing private section of the program in partnership with private employers. DOLE provides a 40% wage subsidy for 20 to 52 working days. Typically, students work just the 20 if they're placed in the municipal offices because the mayors are motivated to help make sure as many students get to participate in the program. And this program has become very large. In 2016, the year that this study was conducted, it was enrolling more than 250,000 students every year. The research questions we developed with DOLE and tried to answer were to examine the causal impact of the program on youth's academic outcomes, their employability, and their employment and job search. What we did in order to make sure we could get those causal impacts is we worked with municipalities that had programs where there were more applicants than there were available employment slots. They did all the screening, determined who was eligible, removed any sort of special set-aside slots, and then from that remaining pool of slots, we randomly assigned the applicants to be those chosen students to be invited to the program. Typically, this was done on a first-come, first-served basis. Now it was done on a randomized basis. Some students were invited to enroll in the program. Some students were told that they should wait until next year. We then measured the effect of enrollment in the program on employment, enrollment, and labor market perceptions 8 to 12 months after programs start in the following academic year. In terms of what we found, for education, the level of enrollment for all program applicants was already very high. 95% were enrolling whether or not they participated in the program. And so we don't see any impact on school enrollment unless we look at subgroups. For example, we do see a modest increase in enrollment for men, and men are the ones who are at higher risk of dropping out of school. Here we're looking at high school and we're looking at college students, and we see the largest impacts among high school students. But again, the enrollment rates are already very high. When students do drop out, they do cite financial problems, highlighting that this challenge of access to education is indeed important. It just doesn't seem to be driving enough students to stay in school. In terms of employability, the students were working primarily in office settings, engaging in a range of office tasks, but we don't see any observed change in skills, changes in student self-esteem, self-reported life skills. We do see that students say they think they're more likely to be able to find jobs in the future, so we see a boost in their confidence. One reason for that may be that we also see an increase in the likelihood that students report they're currently employed. And this increase, because not a lot of students are working at the time of our follow-up, we're only looking 8 to 12 months later, is a 75% increase. Another way to put this is that if you have 100 SPES beneficiaries, 4.2 are moved into employment directly because of SPES. And what's good news for us is that this work doesn't come at the expense of education. We don't see students dropping out of school in order to pursue work opportunities, which might be concerning in a long-term perspective. So this also led us to have some overall policy recommendations, which we shared with DOLE and they've been working with. The first is that SPES, given these findings, may be more effective as a work program than an education program. However, if we think about this program from the perspective of how much does it cost per job found or per dropout avoided, taking our estimates seriously, the costs are very high. Now that said, there's also a benefit to students from the actual money they receive that we're not accounting for here. It's just that if we're thinking about what's the most cost-effective way to get students into work, to get students to stay in school, it doesn't seem to be likely to be this program. One challenge we observed in both quantitative and qualitative evidence was that there were substantial payment delays, particularly on the part of the 40% DOLE counterpart. Half of students had waited three or more months to receive that, and if that's what you're planning on using to pay for your tuition or expenses up front, that could be a problem as well. We also suggested finding ways to help provide more meaningful skills through work experience. This could be through extending the minimum number of working days required so that we don't see so much bunching at that 20 days and more students working closer to 50. And also perhaps thinking about direct training. This could be in life skills or job search training, which has been effective in other contexts. And then rethinking targeting may be really important to think about maximizing program effectiveness. This program is designed to reach out to, as it's worded, the poor but deserving students, but there may be challenges in reaching those most disadvantaged students because of either lack of information about the program, the way the screening criteria is implemented, or also the involvement of politicians who have other desires for the program because they're trying to advance their own agendas. Finally, not from an implementation standpoint, but this evaluation did highlight the need for strong monitoring and communication between the national and regional DOLEs and the local pesos. What we observed was because the local pesos are beholden to the local government units, it was difficult to ensure that SPES was carried out in alignment with the national implementing guidelines. The accountability wasn't always there, and also just the data. And so any efforts to provide additional monitoring data that can be used at the regional and national levels in increasing indicators and terminal reports would be extremely useful towards that goal. I'll stop here. If you have any additional questions and want to reach out by email, I've presented my email address here, and my information is also available on the IPA website. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
What I will be presenting today is the impact evaluation of a component of Sustainable Livelihood program called Microenterprise Development using seed capital. My name is Aniceto Orbeta. I am one of the co-authors of the report that included Marifi Ballesteros, John Paul Corpus, Vicente Paqueo, Celia Reyes. all of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Let me describe the intervention being evaluated. Sustainable Livelihood Program of the Department of Social Welfare and Development runs the largest microenterprise program of the country, reaching over 2 million households. It targets working-age individuals from 4 households, giving preference to the beneficiaries of the Pantawid Pamilya, the country's conditional cash transfer program. Beneficiaries undergo some capacity building sessions and forms an SLP association with 5 to 30 members. They are asked to submit a business plan, which goes into a review process. The business can be new or pre-existing and may be run individually or as a group. Those who pass the screening are provided a seed capital fund or ECF of 10,000 pesos or approximately $208 US per beneficiary. From the proceeds, the association builds a group fund from recouping the grant received through member contributions or business earnings. The basic research question of the study is whether the SLP assistance with seed capital or ECF on Pantawid beneficiary households have impact on the following outcomes of interest. The outcomes are grouped into 4, mainly labor supply, household income, household expenditure, household savings, and investments. For the research methodology, we use both quantitative and qualitative methods. Let me now turn to the findings, starting with the qualitative component. Most participants are middle-aged female spouses. They tended to have low education, as 65% of them did not finish high school. The business projects are mostly group managed, consisting of 91% of the projects, and mostly are in retail trade, 90% of the projects. Many of the businesses have closed, and 50% of the individual projects and 27% of the group managed projects by the time of the survey. The primary reasons for closure are failure to make money, lack of participation of group members. Continuing on with the qualitative findings, the recovery of the grant money is a challenge, as 37% of the projects have not recouped the grant money. It also found out that most of the groups do not earn from the business. Only 1/3 of the group members work in the business, and only 3% receive wages for doing so. Furthermore, only 6% receive dividend from the group businesses. The FDD also reported cash flow problems for sales and lack of member participation in business. Turning now to the results of the quantitative analysis, we find that the CCT spouses are more likely, about 23 percentage points more, to be in the labor force and be employed, 21% more. Those in the individual businesses work nearly 10 hours more per week. There are also similar impacts on the group business, but these are smaller. The study found to have insufficient power to detect significant effects on total household income, expenditures, savings, and capital investments, although we found significant impacts on some components of income, such as some of entrepreneurial and sustenance income and on dividend income. However, given the earlier information on the lack of income opportunities from the business projects supported by the program in the qualitative interviews, our confidence is low that this case the project itself. Now, turning to recommendations, the program is encouraged to consider organizing the different assistance to the poor into a coherent graduation strategy for CCT household. It's now recognized that the poor require more than capital transfer or credit to succeed in livelihood assistance. This is because they are facing many constraints and other risks that need to be addressed besides financing constraints. It appears that the program expressed preference for group-based compared to individual projects. The program should recognize that labor and income benefits from group projects are less direct and take longer to realize compared to individual projects. This lack of direct and immediate benefits may cause beneficiaries to lose interest. In addition, there are also organizational problems with group projects. Group projects require motivated and committed members. It should be recognized that strong commitment and teamwork are needed in group projects. Another recommendation is to improve the development and selection of projects to improve commercial viability. Since the projects came from proposals of beneficiaries, the program should be keen on recognizing where participants are merely pursuing projects that match their skills or interests but have no commercial viability. Project development and selection procedures need to be reviewed for their effectiveness in identifying commercially viable projects. Finally, the program should strengthen its capacity building for entrepreneurial skills, business mentoring, and organizational building. We should explore other delivery mechanisms than the existing ones for these interventions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Excellent. Thank you for the presentation videos, Emily and Aniceto. Again, a reminder, I request the audience to post your questions on the Q&A box, and we will do our best to respond to some of these during the Q&A session. But for now, we will move on to the panel discussion. Today, we have a great panel with us, and together we will try to unpack what it takes to translate the evidence that we have from the evaluations just presented to frame better policies and programs. And also a brief note, you might have seen in the chat that posted by my colleagues from 3IE that we have also nice briefs available of the studies that were just presented. So please do visit those. So I would now, while I'm seeing the panelists are already turning on their mics and cameras, so please do. And so that I can present to you. So for this panel discussion, we have Ms. Rhea Peñaflor. She's Assistant Secretary, Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD, implementers as well of the Sustainable Livelihoods Program, or SLP, that was evaluated by the Philippines Institute of Development Studies. So good to see you, Rhea.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
And then we have Dominique Tutay, Assistant Secretary, Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, and they are the implementers of the Special Program for Employment of Students, or SPES, evaluated by Innovations for Poverty Action, IPA. So good to see you, Dominique.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone.
Morning and good afternoon. And then we have Carlos Bernardo Abad Santos, Assistant Secretary, National Economic and Development Authority, NEDA. Hi, Carlos, good to see you.
Good afternoon and good evening to some people.
And then next, I will present Yun-Yung Cho, who's Senior Economist, Social Protection and Jobs at the World Bank. Hello.
Magandang hapon. Good afternoon, everyone.
I was frozen there for a moment. And then finally, and last but definitely not least, Aniceto Orbeta, Senior Research Fellow from the Philippines Institute of Development Studies. Hi, Aniceto.
Good day, everyone.
And again, just to mention that the speakers' bios are available on the link that my colleagues have provided in the chat box. Let me start with you, Assistant Secretary Peñaflor. The study made some recommendations, very interesting recommendations that we just went through with regard to issues with implementation of the Sustainable Livelihoods program. And it would be really helpful and useful to hear from you about how the department might be using the evaluation insights.
Thank you very much, Marie. First of all, the DSWD would like to thank the International Initiative for Impact Evaluation, or the 3IE, for sharing its impact evaluation to us, entitled Impacts of SLP's Microenterprise Development Assistance on Poor Households in the Philippines. We also would like to thank PID Senior Research Fellow Sir Aniceto Orbeta Jr. and his team. Our gratitude also goes to DFAT and the Australian Embassy in the Philippines for its continued support to the Philippine government and the DSWD. Again, to my fellow panelists, good afternoon and good day to each and everyone. In response to your question, Marie, the DSWD, particularly the Sustainable Livelihood Program, has taken the necessary steps to use the study's results and findings in reviewing its current policies and strategies in delivering efficient livelihood interventions to its program participants. SLP has identified the following action points to utilize the results of this study. First is to ensure the implementation of the graduation approach in the current SLP process. This is currently ongoing and is being launched this year in partnership with the Building Resources Across Communities, or the BRAC, the Asian Development Bank, and of course the DFAT Australia. Second is the continuous review of SLP's program design and implementation, as mentioned also earlier by Sir Aniceto, particularly on improving the screening of participants by revisiting the track selection tool developed by MicroSave and the sorting tool enhanced by PIDS, and the effectiveness of current SLP's implementation and monitoring guidelines, tools, and modules. In relation to SLP's program design and implementation, I would like to share with you that as of December 2020, SLP has already served 2,328,095 households from calendar year 2011 to 2020 by this program track. Of these served households, 1,879,270 were provided with micro-enterprise development. Partial monitoring data has shown from calendar year 2017 to 2022 that a total of 62,477 out of the 78,709 enterprises, or around 79%, are still operational. Number 3 is to strengthen the collaboration with our partners and our stakeholders of the program, particularly interventions leading to wage employment. Number 4 is to conduct an in-house study or research to further assess if there are relative merits between the two types of enterprise to be able to understand each project's advantages or disadvantages better. The self-proposed study or research is included in the approved SLP's research and evaluation agenda's priority topics. Furthermore, the SLP NPMO has developed an SLP research and evaluation uptake plan with a timeline to be completed by December 2021. We have already started this. So this uptake plan will number 1, ensure that SLP is taking necessary steps in fulfilling the identified response and the action points based on the findings and recommendations of this study. And number 2, to monitor and document SLP's actions on the said findings and recommendations. This research and evaluation uptake plan is a document that contains the recommendations of the study and SLP's corresponding identified response or action points, which were discussed and agreed together with SLP's management the activities to be undertaken by the responsible units and divisions in the NPMO, in the National Program Management Office of SLP. And of course, the most important thing is its indicative timeline. So thank you very much, Marie. This is all.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and very interesting to hear all of the follow-up that has been taking place based on the study findings, including also I noted the idea of the identifying further questions, so that you now are conducting further research to do. So very interesting. Now let me turn to Assistant Secretary Tutai. So Dole has used study findings to refocus the special program for the employment of students. And so it would be useful to understand the internal process and policies at Dole on using evidence and implementing more evidence-informed programs. If you could share your insights on what it takes for a department to build this culture of use of evidence, that would be very valuable for our audience.
Okay, thank you, Marie, and to my fellow panelists, good afternoon and good day. We'd also like to thank IPA and 3IE and also DFAT for this initiative here in the Philippines. So at the department, we build the culture of tripartism as a mechanism for policy development and decision making. And by tripartism, we have the government at the driver's seat, and working hand in hand with the employers and the labor sector when it comes to policy development process, whether for new issuances or for policy amendments. And we also consider implementation results, relevant data, and the country's social and economic landscape, and even lessons learned from previous implementation of the programs, which are essential inputs for the enhancement of the policy, as it would affect not just the department itself, but also it would also affect our stakeholders. We are grateful for this undertaking, as the study helped the department, the program managers, the policy makers, and partner implementers appreciate the value of impact evaluation and realize its significance in approaching programs, projects, and policies with evidence-based insights. Further, this jump-started a culture of the use of evidence and impact evaluation, as our very own Secretary Silvestre Bello III gave a directive to all the senior officials of the department to initiate building the capacity of the department through the Dole's research arm, which is the Institute for Labor Studies, to conduct organic impact evaluation studies towards better program implementation and policy making. Let me also provide you some updates after the impact evaluation was conducted. We have reformulated our goals, outcomes, and targets of the program under the new budget framework of the Department of Budget and Management beginning 2018. There is also a distribution of advocacy materials on the program recommendation for wider promotion of our special program for employment of students, and also development of new tools to enhance and refine program monitoring. For instance, the SPES graduates, the beneficiaries by local government unit class, dependents of sugar plantation workers and indigenous peoples, and the beneficiaries with disabilities, victims of armed conflict, and also rebel returnees. So that would be all. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Tutai, and very interesting, and I think sort of very something that goes along with findings many places in the world around the culture. You know, if you have somebody, directives from the top, if you have this, you know, basically champions at the top that send the signals that this is you know, this is needed. We need to use evidence to improve how we do things. That is you know, basically a very important factor in succeeding. And thanks for laying that out. Now let me turn to you, Assistant Secretary Carlos. NEDA has been at the forefront of promoting a culture of use of evidence in the Philippines government, working across various departments and agencies. So what are some of the challenges that NEDA foresees in motivating more departments and agencies to come forward and participate in evidence generation and use, and help the Philippines realize the objectives that are set out in the National Evaluation Policy Framework?
Thank you, Marie. In our experience in implementing the PWP with PIE and DFAT, and in pursuing many functions of NEDA, we've seen I observed about 4, let's say, operational challenges in the course of the years. I think the first one is a misconception about evaluation, appreciation of evaluation, and ownership of the evaluation process and results. Again, we experienced that. It's important to emphasize and clearly differentiate between impact evaluation, performance monitoring, and other types of evaluation, and their intended purposes and outcomes. There are a lot of misconceptions about evaluation, and that again, this has impact in terms of how they appreciate evaluation and the ownership of the evaluation process and the results. We're so glad that, like what Asik Nikki pointed out earlier, that again they had ownership of the process and even of the results. And indeed, after they got the results, they were able to redesign the program based on the results. I think basically in a lot of agencies, we've seen a lot of evaluations that are driven by donors or driven by other agencies, and then so you don't get this ownership of the evaluation process and the results. NEDA has done regular advocacy to promote evidence-based decision-making through various forums and national and international conferences. Among these, we conduct quarterly national evaluation policy forums, which is organized by the House of Representatives and the Senate Economic Planning Office. And for a wider reach of audience, NEDA, with assistance from UNDP, has established a national evaluation portal, which serves as a repository for evaluation studies and learning resource modules. The second challenge is really on resource constraints and lack of funds to implement evaluations. And we've seen that even if agencies have expressed support and interest to do evaluations, they admit that they do not have regular funds to turn this into actual conduct and management of evaluations. And this explains why donors are the primary source of the demand for evaluations, as cited in a UNICEF Commission study. In NEDA, initially in 2015, we established the Monitoring and Evaluation Fund, which supports the conduct of evaluation studies and capacity development activities. However, this fund is limited to what is needed for an all-of-government approach to evaluation. And it's also limited to major programs and projects. So if you want all key agencies to adopt evaluation practices, then we would need to fund these individual agencies. The third challenge is really on the need for evaluation capacity strengthening. And while the M&E Fund supports the conduct of evaluation capacity strengthening activities, there is still a need to address, if we want to expand the scope of monitoring and evaluation, then we also need to expand the scope of capacity building activities, particularly for agencies. We are so happy that in our partnership with DFAT and 3IE, we were able to do a training course on impact evaluation and a workshop in conducting and managing real-world evaluations. However, the reach is limited, and if you want to, again, expand and have this culture of evidence, we also need to expand our capacity development activities. And a related issue here is also the supply of evaluators in the Philippines. We have limited supply of evaluators in the Philippines. So even though if we have enough resources and we have low capacity within agencies, then we need a lot of evaluators who can do evaluations. And I guess the last challenge should be the absence of dedicated evaluation units in agencies. We have very, very little agencies with evaluation units. Normally, evaluation, if ever, is part of the planning and monitoring part of the agency or the function. So we need to basically also more than capacity building, also that structure and that mechanism for evaluation within the different agencies. Thanks, Marie. And that's a lot of challenges that we're facing.
Yes, it is. Thanks for laying that out so clearly. I think it was very interesting to see that you brought a bit about this tension between sort of the need for ownership, which has been very key, for example, to the NEDA, DFAT, 3IE evidence program. That's recognition that this is wholly owned and driven from the Philippines government. I think that on the one side, and then but the tension where the resources sometimes for the evaluation seems to come from donors, and that sort of can potentially sort of undermine that ownership. So I think that's an interesting sort of juxtaposition, but maybe not totally impossible to bridge. That's and I think our evidence programs has sort of been an example potentially of that. But certainly something that calls attention. The other I think very good points that you're making and is around building up the sort of the capacity in having evaluation units, in building up and training local evaluators, etc. I just want to have a quick follow-up with you. So if you had sort of a wish list of what you want to do the next 2 years, potentially within the next phase of our evidence program, what would be sort of your priority tasks, to tackle some of these challenges that you mentioned?
Well, I think one is actually pursuing. I think one main issue also is really the enabling mechanism to be able to establish evaluation as a in different agencies. And again, we have the National Evaluation Policy Framework, but that is a joint administrative order of NEDA and DBM. So again, we want to actually strengthen that mandate either through an executive order, or there are steps in Congress to sort of legislate this mandate and this policy framework, so that we can have a functioning national evaluation system in the Philippines, and then we will able to again get the resources, but also engage government and again institute both the incentive structure for agencies to do evaluation. And again, not only evaluation, I think the most important thing that is really the uptake of evidence. I mean, agencies will say, okay, we'll conduct evaluation because you want us to do that. But again, that's where ownership comes in. If right from the beginning, they should come in saying that we're doing this because we want to improve the program, or we're testing a program and we're not so sure if we want to scale it up or not. So I think that is our priority, but also expanding what we have right now, expanding the existing M&E fund and M&E program of NEDA, and again expanding also our partnerships with 3IE and DFAT, and expanding our partnerships with UNDP. So I think that's those are our priorities with regards to addressing these challenges.
Excellent, and I think one thing that comes through very clearly in both your responses is as well the sort of the communicating the usefulness of evaluation and how it is and how to use it. I think people sort of see it a bit as a black box that is a bit scary, but in fact, the uses are on so many levels, and there's so many types of evaluation that go into a good mixed methods impact evaluation, including drawing on process evaluations and other things, so that there is the usefulness is often, I think, underappreciated and can probably, I think, be communicated much better throughout the process.
Yes. But Marie, just a point. I think it's important when agencies approach doing evaluation, because they are initially they're so fearful about the results because it might be counted against them. But I think the more important thing is to approach it more in a more open manner, that again we need this to improve the program, and not as a badge against us and how we implemented the program. I think it's a very, very important challenge.
Yeah, and recognizing that a good program and a good ministry is one that learns and improves things. It's not one that sort of just did well on an evaluation. I think having that culture. No, that's I think we could continue, but I will. One thing before we go on, we have, because of videos, I realized that we are sort of gaining a bit of time compared to. So if any of the panel at the end, before we open up for Q&A, if you have, I'd love for any of you to have. If you could also think about that, I'll invite that in a couple of moments. Now let me turn to you, Yun, from the World Bank. So the World Bank has an important role to play in building knowledge-based economies. So it would be useful to hear from you about the World Bank's experience in supporting more evidence-informed decision-making processes within the country, in the livelihood support space, but also in a sense more generally. And what might, and additionally, if you could talk to what might the next frontier for a mid-income country like the Philippines be?
Thank you so much for this question, Marie. In fact, I'm very glad that you asked. The World Bank takes pride in our work that we are not just a financing bank, but we are a knowledge bank. So building the knowledge base, helping the government make informed decisions and improve the programming, and support these endeavors with technical expertise and financing, all these are a very core part of our paths. So in terms of promoting evidence-based program design and implementation, the best example in the Philippines must be the Pantawid Pamilyang Conditional Cash Transfer Program, the CCT program with the DSWD. For this program, the World Bank has been partnering with DSWD and NEDA from the design stage of the program. And in addition to financing the program, we have been supporting its continued improvement over time and also assisting some regular impact evaluation, in fact, conducted by PIDS Dr. Orelta's team. In that sense, we are very much glad to see the department's efforts for Pantawid beneficiaries, graduation approaches through SLP, and its evaluation work through this wonderful partnership. I'd like to follow up on, Assistant Secretary Rhea and DSWD and all these researchers who are involved in this activity and further brainstorm how the bank can support DSWD to really incorporate these lessons learned and make necessary adjustments for the program for stronger impacts. So the most recent experience of combining the bank's kind of financing with solid knowledge evaluation in the Philippines is COVID-19 response. We've worked very closely with partners like IPA and DFAT to provide very timely evidence of the ground knowledge on what's working and what's not working in COVID-19 social protection response. The lessons greatly inform the World Bank's COVID emergency operation. We call it Beneficiary First Project with DSWD. And learning from the evidence how well-designed, well-established, well-delivered social protection can actually help low-income families mitigate the negative impact of the pandemic. The project is supporting the government's efforts for digital social protection delivery, very high priority on NEDA for both COVID relief and recovery, in addition to financing us, the program in this difficult time. So these experiences kind of gave me some thoughts on the direction of impact evaluation going forward. Marie, kind of last part of your question, what should be the next? So thanks to 3IE, DFAT, and many partners' efforts, I believe that the culture of evidence-based policymaking is not a stranger to the Philippines. And Asek Kaloy beautifully elaborated on that, culture building activities. We are very thankful for that. What's important going forward would be making the cycle of designing the program implementation, evaluation, and adjustment and improvement, all this cycle more agile and timely. So balancing elaborate and very rigorous evaluation, which may take a very long time, with some nimble, innovative, and timely evaluation will be necessary. So for this purpose, I strongly agree that having key agencies in the driving seat is very important and very welcomed approach. In addition to that, I can think of 3 or 4 areas that we can further work together with all these stakeholders. One is really building further capacity among the practitioners and policymakers. And second is really promoting relevant partnerships such as this. And third, learning lessons, not only from the Philippines, but also from global experiences. And they'll be very much useful for the Philippine context. And ensuring the feedback mechanism among the researchers, policymakers, and implementers, all this cycle work well, so that operations can be revised and refined according to the evidence. So the World Bank will be very happy to continue to be part of such efforts and looking forward to interacting with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and very very timely. I think the issue you bring out about, first of all, of course, ensuring this cycle of evidence throughout, from strategy to planning, programming, implementation, and then learning, and then back in. I think it's great, and I think you're right. And I think the last year has probably driven home to a lot of us, both on the evaluation and the use side, that we haven't been agile enough. And I think that is a challenge, and of course, to some extent, some of that agility has been learned the hard way, I think, during 2020. So actually, it's a good segue to my next question, and bringing in Aniceto from PIDS and Nash from IPA. COVID-19 has definitely got us to think and work more creatively. And so what does this mean for researcher policymaker partnerships going forward from each of your perspectives? So let me start with you, Aniceto.
Yeah, the SLP research has actually been affected by the COVID-19. So we had to be flexible in terms of changing data collection systems and to accommodate that. So that's one thing that we learned with this with COVID-19. And many of our researchers now are the ones that are ongoing have to shift data collection systems and methodologies even because of we cannot be on field and have to conduct face-to-face interview, for instance. So we rely a lot on electronic means, but that also means that we cannot reach the people perhaps that we wanted to reach that would represent the target population. So for instance, what we ask about how the CCT program was able to facilitate the transfer of this social amelioration fund of the government. And we are happy to report that the payment system in place actually in just 1 or 2 weeks was able to release the funds to the Pantawid beneficiaries. But that's only 4 million. The target of the program was about 18 million. So the other 14 million have to be registered and all of that. And that process is very tedious. And I was even, the Pantawid Pamilya were even defeated the non-Pantawid beneficiaries of SAP because the system is not there. They cannot get their money when they need it and all of that. So that's basically what kind of sentiment that we get. And people would not thought that Pantawid Pamilya can respond electronically, but they did. We were able to get substantial results by asking them electronically or online about their experience with SAP. That's flexibility in implementing the research is very important because there will be changes that could happen like this, or even there is a policy change in the implementation which can create problems with but we, as experienced by SLP, we tried to adjust the evaluation and get some results, not the original intended ones, but some useful results that even with the challenges that we face on field. Thanks, Ray.
And maybe if I can push you a little bit. So is there anything that you learned? I mean, there's challenges and you had to adapt, but is there anything that you learned last year that you actually, even if and when things go back to a new normal, let's put it that way, things that you would do differently, Aniceto, that you've learned, that has helped your agility?
Basically, it's a constant interaction with the agency is very important because you will know their challenges of implementing the design that they have crafted at the beginning. So that you'll be able to anticipate what will be the program, so you can shift, for instance, of changing some of the design elements and all of that. So that constant communication throughout is very important, and you can understand the implementation challenges that they are facing, and so you will be able to shift your like for some data gathering or target population or even problems. Shifting problems will be what kind of problems are they facing? What's the most important problem that they are facing in the implementation today that they want evidence of? That is that regardless of what the condition is, that constant communication with the partner agency is very, very important in being flexible and being able to address what they need in terms of information for decision making.
Excellent. Yes, no, I think that's great. I think it's sort of empathy levels have increased, I think, during the last year, and understanding how many implementation challenges there are, and hence how important the adaptability, the constant communication. I think that's a great point. Something we need to sort of always apply in effect in the exchange between evaluation and evidence uptake. Let me now turn to you, Nasreen or Nash, from your perspective.
Thank you, Marie. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the DOLE leadership, ASEC Nikki for presenting earlier as well, and also the ILS team of DOLE for being such a great partner, an excellent partner in the implementation of the SPES impact evaluation. In these times, it is even more relevant to work together to generate evidence on what works, and also to understand the mechanisms of how government programs achieve their goals, or whether certain goals are reached more than others. And I think it's very important to really open avenues for researchers and policymakers to collaborate, to generate evidence, at the same time empower and build capacity within government agencies to collect, analyze, and use data, as ASEC Kaloy mentioned earlier, highlighting the importance of M&E capacity as well at the government level. Oftentimes, this goes beyond just running a study, but really digging deep and understanding the challenges being faced by policymakers and program managers in the day-to-day running of their programs, as well as the policy constraints that they face in implementation of their programs. I think this really requires an investment of time, more so now in the time of COVID. From the research team side, to build relationships, as well as making sure that there's consensus on what we would like to achieve together in terms of generating evidence on the programs we're evaluating and using evidence for policymaking. It's a bit challenging to do this now without a lot of in-person meetings in the time of COVID, but we should leverage technology and establish communication lines, as Dr. Babes also mentioned earlier, as much as we can to build these partnerships. And this could also mean, looking at delivering M&E trainings and capacity building activities online creatively to engage government agencies. At IPA, we do a lot of work in trying to see how we can further improve communication and working online and, engaging partners in the time of COVID. For evidence to be useful to policymakers, they must be involved from the beginning. The beginning of the impact evaluation, and usually government agencies themselves have their own questions on the programs that they're running, so we should really take that into account. I think the Policy Window Philippines did a great job in working with government agencies in identifying priority programs for the evaluation. And I remember before we started the SPES evaluation, which was about 2015, I think we were the first PWP study. We met several times with various offices of the DOLE. Our international researchers spent time in Manila to get to know DOLE's programs. We had several workshops so we could work together on the proposed research design. During the implementation of the evaluation study, DOLE and IPA formed a technical working group, and we are very thankful to DOLE for being so proactive in putting together that TWG in order to address any concerns that came up during the study duration. And as you know, when you're implementing such studies, there are a lot of things that can come up. We communicated closely with the program managers and the Institute for Labor Studies. We implemented a process evaluation that gave us a lot of insight into the SPES. And of course, the process evaluation wouldn't have happened without the support and the cooperation of DOLE. We also implemented several capacity building activities together with DOLE. All throughout the project. So the goal is really for us to continue the conversations with DOLE on building evidence on the programs. And in fact, as Nikki mentioned earlier, this has resulted to other impact evaluations between IPA and DOLE. We've worked on several impact evaluations after SPES. And hopefully we can continue the conversation for the time being online, leveraging on our existing relationship. Definitely, I think it matters, as you mentioned, Marie, earlier, that having support and having champions from the top of the leadership is very important. And it matters that DOLE is an agency that was very much open to learning and using the results of the evaluation as well. And I also think having researchers, such as Emily, who believe in the importance of supporting our government partners, and having the IPA team, build a strong relationship with the Dolly team as well, were really key aspects to this partnership.
Wonderful, thank you. No, I think it cannot be emphasized enough. I think this issue of constant engagement and relationship building, and it occurred to me. I think as you mentioned, there had been relationships built up before, which probably made it easier even during last year. I think one question is, for evaluators to evaluate how what's the best way of building up relationships when you cannot meet, and I think that's there might be, that's also a learning that we'll probably have been forced to have, and is also worth looking at from an evaluation perspective. But excellent point. And now I do have a couple of questions already coming in, but I wanted to honor my request or sort of an offer to if any of you have any questions to each other before I open up for two or three other questions. Any brave souls?
I have.
Yes, please, Aniceto.
After doing several impact evaluation, my basic questions, because we agree that we are doing this to improve the implementation of programs. So my next question really is on the after we have done all of this. Is there anything that like implementation agencies like DOLE and DSWD are facing in terms of the recommendations that they were given, implementing it and all that? I think that's the next set of questions that should be, because sometimes researchers have very generalized, or even if it's very actionable recommendation, putting it on the ground is not as easy. So I would like to ask our implementers, what kind of challenges are you reading an evaluation facing into converting it into something that will improve the implementation of the program? I think that's my, as a researcher, that's very important for us to know as well. Actually, this came from you already get questions from the project management office of the SLP on asking us to explain some more. So, but we don't. I would like that to know what kind of challenges are you facing in terms of implementation recommendations, for instance, if you agree with the recommendations that are important for improving implementation. Yeah.
Great question. Would huh?
Addressing that
yes. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Sir Orbeta. I think the greatest challenge that SLP is facing right now is we are awaiting, and we do not want to preempt the executive order that will be issued by the president in the full devolution of the Sustainable Livelihood Program. So with that, for me, that's the greatest challenge. But we already submitted our transition plan to the DBM, and we have not yet heard from them, because again, we are awaiting, everyone's awaiting for the official executive order. For me, as the subcluster head of the specialized programs where SLPs lodge, this is the greatest challenge that we are facing when we devolve this, because we will be, while we have the transition plan, we still don't know if this will be approved, when do we start, etc. So everything will really be anchored on whatever is the order of the president, the executive order on this. And secondly, we are implementing the Padayon SLP graduation project, and this will be until 2022. That's about the time when SLP would still be with the department, but we would like to, in case we would like to give this or provide the technology to our local government units, because this Padayon SLP graduation project, this is a project supported by DFAT Australia and together with ADB, where we are pilot testing 3,000 SLP beneficiaries on microenterprise. We will provide MDP, but the difference is that these are four-piece households who have already reached the level 3. The SWIDI, social welfare development indicators, meaning to say they're already self-sufficient, and we will be coaching and closely monitoring them. So we would like to have a rollout supposedly after 2022, since we have a pilot testing. But again, because we are awaiting the executive order, we still don't know. So meanwhile, whatever comes out of this result of the project, we will gladly provide this in aligned also to whatever the executive order will say. So there's Sir Orbeta. I think that for me that's the greatest challenge, because we also calculate all our moves because of this. With the Mandanas ruling or the Supreme Court ruling to fully devolve these social welfare programs to our local government units. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So I will now move. We've gotten some questions from participants. One of them you will all know well, Manny Jimenez, who is the previous executive director of 3IE and is also tuning in. He's asking, and this question is Fasek Kaloy. He said, to relieve the intra-government budget constraints for serious evaluation, who would have to be approached and convinced? Which agencies and individuals?
I think you need to have, again, first the key and major agencies that implement all of these reform programs, the socioeconomic programs. It's important to get these agencies, because basically these are those that a lot of resources are expended by government. In fact, one of the questions that we're still grappling now in NEDA is, again, looking at expenditures for social programs over the past decade, and we've spent a lot for health, for basic education, universal education, again, free tertiary education. We've spent a lot of efforts, but then why are our outcomes still not very good? Again, I think it's important to look at that because we've done all of these things. We've done them again in education. We've done teacher training, curriculum development, but then again, we're not seeing that outcomes. I think it's very important. So again, it's important to look at these major agencies that implement socioeconomic programs. And again, important is to basically get to get the leadership, the buy-in of their leadership, and mid-level management. Again, I think another issue we had in the PWP, especially for two important projects, was that there was a change in leadership, and that stalled the process for 2 years. Again, buying in, getting. I mean, it stalled a lot of it. So I think it's also important get leadership, but also get middle managers to appreciate it. I think that's very important because once leadership change, you need support also in middle management. Just because sometimes the transition is not very well in terms of, again, getting the ownership appreciation of the new minister, the new secretary.
Great. So in a sense, I mean, so it's not, if I hear you correctly, it's sort of, you know, the funds are there because in a sense, you know, we do these programs, right? And so within the doing programs, one probably should sort of put some funds aside to actually learn how they're working, and hence be able to achieve those outcomes. So it's more of a, not necessarily, you know, the resource constraint, but it's actually prioritization question, which comes back to the to sort of the incentives and ownership. If I,
Yes.
you know, I think that's.
Yes, I think we did a very important reform, which is the senior high school program, right? But again, the evaluation framework for that was really not there when the initially there to look at it. Now there have been several evaluations done. Some was done by Dr. Orbeta also, but then in terms of, again, you're putting this big reform. I mean, initially you want to have an evaluation framework at the beginning also, so that then you would have this robust evidence if the program is working or not, or if it's not a design problem but a process problem, then I think you have to embed that, and that's what we're trying to do. Like look at evaluation not as an afterthought, but really as part of the program cycle.
May I be recognized, Marie? I would like to add to what Asek Kaloy was saying, because I was looking at our data also regarding the three levels of improvement, levels of our under SWIDI, and I've seen, I was checking in our data as with regards to the improved well-being solely for 4Ps. This is Q3 data that we would like our 4Ps on the survival level, meaning to say this is the food poor. Our physical target is 150,000. But I think this is where we really are having challenges, because for third quarter, the physical accomplishment where they are no longer food poor is around 5,803 only. And if you look at the subsistence level, the target that we're supposed to hit is 4 million, and on the third quarter we were only able to accomplish 1.3 million, no? And lastly, the highest is the self-sufficiency. Those who are already better in terms of they have already worked, they're able to have some income. The target is 220,000, but we were able to accomplish more than 600,000. There you will see that those who are better in the sense that they're able to have income, that's a higher percentage. And those who are food poor, they're the ones struggling. But of course, I'm still awaiting for the fourth quarter report, the fourth quarter data. But at least we can deduce that in a year, even if it's already third quarter, our beneficiaries are struggling, no? Especially in this time of pandemic. This is what the data tells us with our Pantawid beneficiaries. So how much more those who have not received grants or the social amelioration program, for example. So these are things that we would like to see and craft perhaps better policies, sound policies to address what Asek Kaloy has also observed earlier. Thank you, Marie.
Right. Thank you for adding that. I actually have a question for you, Asek Peñaflor, from Fructoso C. Agustin. He's asking, what is the commitment of the government in enhancing livelihood programs implementation to ensure better impact to the lives of the underemployed, marginalized, and disadvantaged workers, both in the formal and informal sectors?
Of course, we know very well that when it comes to informal sectors, the mandate or that function is on our shoulders, no, with the SWD. And to answer the question of uh, our attendee, we provide better access in terms of opportunities that increase productivity of livelihood assets of our beneficiaries. And currently, SLP is continuously coordinating partnership with other agencies and other stakeholders. That's why since our engagement with ADB, this Padayon SLP graduation project is really something that we'd like to push forward, because we do not want our beneficiaries to remain poor. We'd like them to graduate from poverty, to exit from the program, and to be referred, or to be taken, not really taken care of, but that they're able to stand for themselves in case there's a risk of falling back or sliding back to poverty. We have partners like the local government units who are there, and the Mandanas ruling is right in time for us to communicate also to our local government units that you have bigger era, and so social services is supposed also to be part of your job, but of course we also need to capacitate them. That's really our major role in the execution of this ruling. Marie, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just have one last very quick question answer, and I think this goes to as well to Ase Kaloy from Ana Erika Laresa, because this is so important to us. You were mentioning that the issue of lack of supply of evaluators in the Philippines. And so she's asking, are there any programs, activities available where new and aspiring Filipino evaluators like me can get involved to gain networks and experience to become more competent as an evaluator and to address the issue you raised? And I'll just give you, you could just give a soundbite, very close, very short.
As an evaluator myself, get involved in evaluation projects. I mean, do the capacity building, but then you can only grasp a lot of the intricacies of doing especially impact evaluation if you conduct impact evaluation. So be part of as much impact evaluation projects as possible with reputable institutions or agencies. I mean, that's it, because basically the basic learning is there available, whether online or through a lot of courses. But then it's really important to implement projects, be part of different. And I think that's also important. The capacity is there very, very low, because basically we don't have a lot of impact evaluation projects ongoing in the Philippines. I think that's also a chicken or egg problem. Unlike when I was in India, you have a lot of projects being, a lot of impact evaluations happening all over the place. So you get a lot of people who work on impact evaluation projects. But that's what be involved in as much evaluation projects as you can. But that's the only thing you get to you get to have the competence in doing impact evaluations.
Great. Thank you so much for taking that quickly. And I think just to add that now you've also seen several. So you met Aniceto, Nash, 3IE, etc. So you can also reach out to us, and we can also help in contacting you. There will be further impact evaluations within the Philippines evidence program, and so there may be ways that we can help make connections, etc. With that, we did reach slightly 2 minutes over the time. I would like to thank again
Hello, everyone. This is Stuti from 3IE here. It seems that Marie has, I think she's back, or maybe she got dropped off. Very sorry for this just last minute hitch, but at least I think this was in time for us to at least close the session as we had planned. I think I'd just like to say thank on behalf of 3IE for actually taking the time to, come and attend this session, ask these very insightful questions and engage in this really helpful discussion. And especially as 3IE actually also prepares to sort of launch phase 2, I think some of the insights and questions and issues that have been raised here would be very helpful for us as we go ahead and plan for the next phase with NEDA and DFAT. So I think with that, we can close this session, and thank you so much. And for the questions that we could not answer, we will try and do is we will send these questions over to the panelists, and if they can take the time to sort of respond, and we can sort of mail these questions back to all the participants. So thanks a lot. And I think with that, we can bring the session to a close. Marie is here.
Something with my connectivity today. I was done. Thank you everyone for the great participation, and look forward to engaging further in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations again. Thank you, Sir Aniceto.
Thank you. Bye-bye.